Let me start with the question. When did you move to Mexico, or have you lived there your whole life?
I moved here after graduating from undergrad. I grew up in Maryland outside Washington, D.C., and I originally had a Fulbright grant to do research here in Mexico. So that was about 5 years ago.
5 years ago? Okay. And what is your main focus, and what motivated you to become a journalist?
Right. So at the moment, I mostly report on environmental issues and issues with indigenous communities in Mexico, sometimes about urbanism here in Mexico City. And I was motivated to become a journalist because I really enjoy research and writing, but I wanted to have a more immediate impact to my work than, going into academia, for example, which is what I maybe envisioned earlier on. So really making issues widely known and helping people have access to what's going on in Mexico and other countries was a big motivation for me.
Right. Nice. So is there a type of intimidation for journalists? I know you don't really focus on like narcos or drugs or
Mm-hmm.
cartels, but is there still like something in the media that's being censored in Mexico or controlled?
Yeah, it is a big issue here. Even though I don't like directly cover the drug trade or those sorts of issues, it does, come up sometimes. And I'd say especially in rural areas, people are very just like careful about what information they share. Since I cover environmental issues, there's actually, also a big problem here in Mexico of kind of environmental defenders and indigenous activists also being targeted. So you definitely have to be careful, like what information you're sharing, making sure you're not, going to make people vulnerable by what you're publishing, and you have to be careful while you're reporting that you understand the risks of the place that you're going, and reaching out to local contacts to make sure that you're being safe while you're reporting. But there are areas of the country where there just isn't a lot of journalism right now because organized crime is pretty much running things.
Yeah, I read.
So, so it
Yeah.
is concerning. It's sort of like news blackouts in certain parts of the country.
Okay. And I did read that you have worked for like The Guardian, the Al Jazeera English, Sierra Online, City Lab, and over a dozen other publications. How has that like improved your work, and how was that experience overall?
Well, as a freelancer, you have to be open to trying working with new publications that have different writing styles. So I think it has made me a stronger journalist because each outlet has kind of its own style, and you'll get feedback from the editor. Um, it can be difficult. It's to have like very steady gigs, so you always have to be like on your toes and reaching out to new people. But overall, it's been a good experience, and hopefully, I've been able to reach a lot of readers with my articles.
Definitely, I did read a couple of them. They're really good. I also took a little part of one of the posts that you did. It's called Mexico City, State of the Stomach. And this part, I'm going to read it for my classmates that haven't seen it yet. So the part goes, for many years, Mexico City was hardly an international destination. Starting in the 1970s, the federal government was more focused on promoting beach destinations like Acapulco, Cancun, and Los Cabos. Moreover, the city reputation suffered through years of high crime in the 1980s and the 1990s, and the devastation of the 1985 earthquake, which leveled many parts of Mexico City. In the early 2000s, left-leaning mayors Andrés Manuel López Obrador, now Mexico's president, invested heavily in the city historic downtown, attracting visitors who have long avoided the area. But another setback came with the drug war launched in 2006. Mexico City was largely removed from the violence, but headlines about bodily cartel confrontations in Mexico turned many tourists away. So my question is, how have you I know you showed images in the article. You kind of try to show the good side. How hard can that be for journalists?
It's tricky. I mean, the outlet where I wrote that story, it's called Culinary Backstreets, and it's not your typical travel publication. They really like to show like a more nuanced view of the places they write about. So it can be hard to strike a balance. And I mean, I love living here. It's a really amazing country, but I think we also have to be honest about the difficulties people who live the difficulties they face. Because it's a really big tourist destination, but I think sometimes people come and they don't really understand like what day-to-day life is. So in my opinion, that's also an important perspective to share. But you know, as I say in the article, like the Mexican government has also been very strategic about how it promotes itself and promotes tourist destinations. But I think it's our job as journalists to also question those narratives and show how things can be a lot more complex. So that's kind of what I was trying to do with that article.
Perfect. And what do you expect from you as a journalist to change in the future? Like, what would you wish can change and happen?
It's a tricky part of the work. I definitely was attracted to it because I felt like in journalism you can get your ideas out there, share information, and I sort of thought that would translate into changes and action. But I think both in the U.S. and Mexico right now, you know, it's difficult. And at least here in Mexico, there's a lot of really good investigative journalism uncovering corruption and all of these problems, but that it doesn't always translate into changes in policy or, you know, the perpetrators being held accountable. So I think, you know, we can't expect like automatic outcomes of our work, but it is important to contribute to, you know, overall understanding. And it might be a slow process, but I think eventually covering these types of stories does lead to change. You just can't count on that like in the short term. You have to find like other ways to motivate yourself, or it just gets frustrating.
And are there any stories that you hear about the U.S.? Just anything like that catches just the people in Mexico, and when they see it, it seems like stereotypes or any of that you know
of. Like the way Mexico is covered in the U.S. or
yeah, how
the reverse?
we're portrayed towards Mexico. Like, how are we
Okay.
guys?
Yeah. I mean, something I've been thinking about lately, a lot of people over the years have asked me like about school shootings because I think it's just a very like shocking aspect of U.S. culture. And I think it goes against what people think the U.S. is. You know, here people like hear really positive things about like you can earn more money and it's safer and it's beautiful. So I think something like school shootings, a lot of Mexicans are just like thrown off. Like, why does that happen? Why is it such a big problem? And like there was a student killed at a high school here in Mexico City a couple of weeks ago. And it was one of the UNAM high schools. And it was a really big deal here. And it's just like interesting how in the US we've gotten so used to school shootings. But in Mexico, which like overall there's so much more violence, just like one student getting killed was a really big deal. So that's just one of those issues that kind of like goes against people's preconceptions, maybe that like the US is safe and Mexico is dangerous. And yeah, for whatever reason, that's something I've like actually been asked about a lot.
And to wrap it up with our last question, if there's anything you want to just tell the students in my class about just being a journalist, my main focus is communication studies, but there's other students that are going into the journalism. Is there anything you would recommend? Any advice?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really rewarding profession, in my opinion. It is difficult, you know, I'm sure you all are aware that there's like lots of cuts right now in the industry. So it's a tough job market, but I think if you're motivated and really passionate about it, it has so many rewards. And like for international reporting, at the moment, it's the same situation that like a lot of jobs are getting cut, but people like me and I have a lot of other colleagues who freelance. So, you know, it's hard, but you can make it work. And I think it's just a rewarding job that it can be challenging, but I still like, I'm excited to do it every day. So I want to encourage you all to stick with it.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time and, taking the time to do this interview. It's a really big deal for us and for everyone to get to know a little bit of a different perspective. So I will still stay in touch with you. We'll talk, and I will present this to my class. I thank you so much.
No, of course. Good luck with finals and everything.